Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. In this one, we're taking a look at Tuffnut Bumbling Hulkster, one of the brand new heroes from Super Slam. If I'm going to be honest, these heroes are not the best. The best one, I can't even think of the best one because they're just like all C tier max. Like, they are not amazing. But what they do have is a lot of cards that are incredibly fun to play. Both of the new Guardians get to play a ton of really fun auras. You get to stack up and throw a really big number. KO gets to pump up a bunch of really small attacks, and it's sort of a different experience from Brute entirely. And Tuffnut gets to be a pretty cool hybrid deck that gets to swap between an aggressive pile as well as a high blocking pile. This list being that exactly, it's a switchboard list where you can go between a aggressive version with claws and something like Blood Rush Bellow here, or a defensive version that's just going to block out and swing club. And the nice thing is you get to roll a lot of scab skin leathers versus a lot of matchups. So if you're a gambling man, Tuffnut might be the deck for you. But none of these decks are really that good. I don't think any of the decks I show are going to be super competitive. Normally I look to the first event of the set to see if anything truly exceeds, and really all that told me was that OG KO is the one that we really need to care about, but we're not going to end up looking at him until after all of these videos are up for the new heroes. So for the first one, let's take a look at who I think is the most fun and the one I pulled the Marvel Young Hero for. So expect a Tuffnut Blitz video at some point for the set, or Silver Age, or whatever format you play a Young Hero in. But for now, we have Tuffnut Bumbling Hulkster. So let's get started. Tuffnut is a revered brute hero. He is 3 intellect. He is the second hero in the game with 3 intellect, the other being Data Doll, who actually became broken at one point in Blitz because of some new cards that were printed, but no more because cards got banned. Oh well. He has 40 health though, which is pretty nice. He has 2 abilities. The first, the one that matters the most, you can tap him at instant speed to pitch the top card of your deck. If that card has 6 or more power, the crowd cheers you. What is the crowd cheering you? Well, it matters for some effects. Mainly the second effect, where when the crowd cheers you, you make a toughness token. Toughness tokens are at the start of your opponent's turn, you destroy it, and the next action you defend with gains 1 block. This deck is all actions, so the next card you defend with will gain a block. Notably, there are Tuffnut decks that are going to try to play things that aren't actions, being blocks or defense reactions, or just attack reactions that block 3. So if your opponent swings a weaker attack against you, you have something to defend that won't use your toughness tokens. However, since this is a hybrid list, we don't really have room for those. There's really only one flex slot, and I chose to make that CNC instead, and it's not even really a flex slot because I made the list so you have to add 9 every game, and that's one of the 9 you're going to add when you play the fatigue package. So you really can't afford that. But if you are playing one version of Tuffnut, either it be an aggressive list or it be a defensive list, I would suggest cutting down on some of these cards that we'll talk about later. We'll talk about this in the sideboard section, for some of those other cards. Either it be attack reactions that are just block 3s, or it be things like D-reacts. Either one, or even blocks. Blocks are good. There are some pretty good blocks now. So you don't have to use your toughness in those matchups. For the rest of our equipment, we are going to be talking about the fatigue plan first, because I think that's really where Tuffnut shines, is a slower game against a slower opponent. So Romping Club is going to be our main weapon. I know a lot of people want to play Rock, but Rock just is not this deck. This list wants to be on a lot of yellows, not a lot of blues, because the blues don't all have 6 power. If you wanted to play a Rock version of Tuffnut, and I'm sure at some point I'll not have a video idea and I'll show you the Rock version of Tuffnut, you're going to need to play a lot more blues. But you won't get to play really good cards like Swing Big, Show of Strength, Jaws of Victory. You won't get to play Send Packing. You won't get to play like Dig In. Well, some of these you will. You'll play Send Packing, you'll play Dig In, but they're going to feel really bad to hit. And most of this deck feels really good to hit off of Tuffnut. Where Tuffnut really shines is when you hit something you really care about or something you really want to hit off of his own ability. Mainly the yellows, since they give you the toughness token you want and they give you enough resource for your turn. Hitting some of the blues that are in our deck feel really bad, mainly the Tough Smash Up and the Disperse, because they don't give us the toughness token that we really care about for blocking. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you want to hit the blue. But most of the time as well, we hit a red where, you hit a red, you don't have the resource to do what you want, and now you're just stuck with the toughness token and cards in hand. So mitigating that, playing more yellows, is why it's important, which is why we're on club, as if we have our tunic up or we have a red in hand, we can still swing club for some meaningful amount of damage if we end up not getting what we want off of Toughnut's ability. For the rest of our equipment, we are playing the Scowling Flesh Bag, as it is just the best brute helmet in the entire game, one of the best helmets in the game, period. We are playing Findle Spring Tunic main board because we really care about it. Because of Toughnut's ability not giving us always what we want, Tunic can be a really nice way to help mitigate that. We are playing Apex Bonebreaker because, like every card in the deck except I think 9, so 3 different cards, block 6, so you're going to get the Might token really easily, and then finally we're on Scabskin Leathers. Now, for the fatigue version, of course this is the armor we're bringing in when we're fatiguing, there are another pair of shoes you can actually play, and those are the Revered Shoes from the Armory deck. Those have the same effect as Dig In, where when they defend, you can pay up to 3 to make that many toughness tokens. I originally was testing those. However, in a lot of situations, the toughness tokens really only matter for Disperse and Disarm. Other than that, there aren't many times that we need more than one toughness token, because Jaws of Victory needs us to be cheered, not have a toughness, so Tuffnut can do that. And Escalate Order only needs 1 toughness, same as Old Leather and Vim, so we don't need that since Tuffnut gives us 1 toughness token. So relying on extra dig up effects only matter if we know we're drawing Disperse or Disarm. So instead, it's better if we play something like Scabskin Leathers, because if we have a hand that's stuck on multiple cards, we have a card stuck in our arsenal, we can roll it, take the gamble of maybe I don't just get to swing my club this turn and that's okay, to try and prevent more damage at our opponent. Because we only have 3 cards stuck in our hand, it can be very hard to get cards out, and if we have to keep cards in our hand, we don't really care, because that just means we have more cards in our deck in total. So rolling Leathers on turns where we can go club plus another attack gives us just more threatening damage, since we're going to be up, since we're only seeing 3 cards a turn on average anyway. Moving to the actual main board, I want to take a look at the 3 reds we are electing to play every game first. These are Jaws of Victory, Show of Strength, and Swing Big. Show of Strength and Swing Big are pretty basic. They are 2 for 8s that block 3. Swing Big gives your opponent a Quicken if it doesn't hit, but that's okay, since the turn that they fully defend the Swing Big probably won't be a turn they can realistically use the Quicken. And Show of Strength gets -1 for each card of power 6 or more defending it, which really only matters against Guardian and Brute, which, oh well. But these 2 cards are 2 for 8s. They're very powerful, really good 2-card hands. We really can't elect to not play them because they also block 3 and can just force our opponent to defend. Jaws of Victory is the next best red in the deck. It is a block 3 that gets go again extremely easily because it's so easy to be cheered, as well as it itself can cheer us, which can give us an extra toughness token. Moving on to the blues, because the yellows are the main bulk of the deck, we'll talk about them last. We do play the 3 blue 6s that the deck actually has access to, those being the 3 Wrecker Romps, as well as the 3 Wind Up the Crowds. Wrecker Romp is pretty, standalone reason, it's fine. It's a blue 6. It works for all the brute cards. OGKO isn't playing Wreck-A-Romp anymore because there's so many blues that he could be playing. It really only matters for his gloves, and at that point you don't care. But a deck like this that needs 6s and blues just loves having Wreck-A-Romp. Wind Up the Crowd doesn't block, but it is a wind up that might matter a little more for when we actually play claws. But also, it's another way to get a toughness and a vigor token that's really nice. Vigor tokens feel pretty good because if we have a hand that hits something like the red off the top with Tuffnut, we can still swing club. Or if we have a vigor token, it can make our turns when we roll scabs a lot better because if we hit a blue off of Tuffnut, we can then throw a 2-cost plus still swing club, which is pretty damn good. The other 2 blues in the deck are just the 2 blues that I think are generally the best that we have access to. Those being the 30 extra copies of Tough Smash Up in blue. We'll talk about that card a little more when we go over the yellows. But also Disperse. Disperse is a card that I actually read a little wrong in the set review. Same as another card as well. This Disarm Dehead, I think, is the red version of this, and that other card all have very similar effects where when it attacks, if you've been cheered, you make a toughness token, so you get an extra one, but they all have a different block effect. The other one, I can't remember the name of, puts itself on the bottom if it has 6 block. The red version, Dehead, or whatever that card is called, puts an aura on the bottom. Disperse puts their opponent's arsenal on the bottom, and Disarm, which is another card we're playing, makes them put a card from their hand on the bottom. So, having access to this extra arsenal disruption is really nice. So I elected to play Disperse as one of our extra blues. Looking at the yellows, let's start with Tough Smash Up so we can go over the blue version of Tough Smash Up. This is one of the 2 Clash cards that Brute gets access to, or this one specifically Revered gets access to, but you're not playing this one inside of Pleiades. It's a 3 for 6 at yellow, a 3 for 5 at blue, and when it defends within a hero, you clash, and the winner gets a toughness token. Where these differ from a lot of the other clash effects is that you can put your card on the bottom, win or lose, which means if you clash, you see a swing big on top, but you really need a yellow on top to swing your weapon or do something else. You can bottom that swing big, save it for later, and then still get to pitch with Tuffnut to get your next effect. Similar to if you hit like a Disperse off the top, you'll probably still win your clash because, you know, there's really only one Brute in the format at this point, and every other deck doesn't really play the most power, consistently at least. So you'll be able to get your toughness token, bottom the card you don't want, and then, you know, go about your day. We do play Vigorous Smash Up. This is the Brute version. We only play the yellow since we care a little less about making Vigor tokens. However, making Vigor tokens are still really nice because, again, if we hit a red or if we hit a blue, our turn can differ. As well as we have a card like Blood Rush Bellow in our deck that does actually care about the Vigor token sometimes. So overall, the smash ups are pretty nice. The rest of the yellows are just really good yellows. We'll go over them all real quick. Send Packing is some extra arsenal disruption. It's a little hard to play, but it can be played, and when it does, it is pretty nice. No Hero Stands Alone is a 3 for 6 that does have 0 block, but if you've controlled a toughness token, it can defend from your arsenal, which that's something that Toughnut actually doesn't really have. He doesn't have many good arsenals, so this can be a nice card to actually put there and save. When it defends, you clash with the attacking hero, and the winner chooses a attacking or defending card to get -3/-3. So usually this will be a 1 card block 6 or 7, depending on if you're using your toughness token, which is really, really powerful. Good Natured Brutality is a 2 for 6 that also blocks 0, but if we have no cards in our hand, it gets +6 and we get cheered. So we'll get an extra toughness for next turn, but also it's a good card to block out the end of a chain. If our opponent decides to go for 2 really small attacks or 1 really small attack prior to a big swing at the And we can save our Good-Natured Brutality to block the last attack, thus blocking out and not wasting our turn on the toughness that would have been spent a lot earlier. Disarm is the same as Disperse, but instead of putting a card from their arsenal, they have to put a card from their hand on the bottom. This one's a lot stronger. I'm glad this one's at yellow because I think this is the best one. It's the perfect color for the deck. We do play 3 Dig In. Even though I said we didn't want the shoe, Dig In does have some usefulness, and it is a good 6 to actually have in the deck. And then the last revered card for the main board is Crowd Goes Wild. This is a 3 for 6 that costs 3 less if we've been cheered. A really good one to have when we go for Scab Skin Leather turns, because if this is in our hand, we can roll Scabs, use Tuffnut. As long as we hit something, we can swing Club. If we roll a 4 or more, we can go Club into Crowd Goes Wild because it will be free. So just a really nice card to have for the deck. As well as if we hit a red, it's always playable since we still get cheered. And then the last 2 cards in the deck are Beast Within and Bloodrush Bellow. There aren't many ways to discard Beast Within. It's only cards in our sideboard and Bloodrush itself. But it is a card we need in the deck because discarding it to these effects gives us a card back, which is really good for when we do go for our aggro plays. Other than that, it's a 6 power, 3 block yellow, so the stat line we really, really want. And then Bloodrush Bellow, even though it's not a 6, which does drop our rate a little bit, it is very good when we go for those aggressive plays, especially off of our aggro plan, which we'll take a look at when we go over the inventory. For this version, though, it really doesn't do much. It really just will replace our arsenal to find something we hopefully want to arsenal, and then let us swing Club for 7. Other than that, not really the best. It doesn't pump up a lot of our revered attacks because they're not brutes, so our Crowd Goes Wild, our No Hero Stands Alone won't get bigger. I guess if we do end up swinging with a Good-Natured Brutality, which is a 2 for 6, it could be pretty nice, but also does buff Jaws of Victory, which is one of the attacks we'd want to pump as it is a going-in attack. So having Bloodrush Bellow in our deck really isn't that bad. Finally, let's take a look at the inventory. For Arcane Barrier, we're playing Northern Gloves and Skullhorn for 3 AB off 2 pieces. Northern Gloves is here because we want to play Beaten Trackers in some matchups, and Kano is going to be one of the ones we want to go aggressive against Spring Beaten Trackers, so we can't play Northern Boot. And we're playing Skullhorn because against Wizard, we do block so incredibly well physically, it's hard to block a lot of Arcane, so Skullhorn can help us get a little bit of extra Arcane prevention. For our aggressive plan, we of course are playing the Beaten Trackers. This goes really nicely with cards like Savage Feast. And we are playing Mandible Claws as well as Savage Sash. Now, the aggro plan, I will say, if you were going to cut one thing out of the deck, it would be the aggro plan over the fatigue plan. Since you're only drawing 3 cards a turn, it can be very hard to find Bloodrush Bellow in a lot of situations. This would mean that when you actually do want to play aggressive, a lot of the time you're going to end up blocking. A card that's not in the deck is the 6 block. I'm blanking on the name right now. But the 2 for 6 that blocks 6, that makes you discard a card when it attacks or blocks. The reason that's not in the deck is because it really hurt consistency. There's a lot of times where I'd sit on it in an arsenal, it would do nothing. Or there are times where I'd draw it on the same turn as Good-Natured Brutality, and there just wouldn't be a big enough attack that I'd want to block with both of them, that I'd have to end up not blocking with either or wasting one of them. So that card's not in the deck because we really don't have the opportunity to use it. So Savage Sash, if you have to defend with Savage Sash fully, like block with it, obviously don't waste the last health, but if you have to, that's fine, because there are times you don't find Bloodrush Bellow and you just need the health. I've played games where Bloodrush Bellow has been in, all 3 have been in the bottom third of my deck, and you just find it so late because you're not seeing enough cards since you only have 3 intellect. But there are times where you will draw Bloodrush Bellow early and you'll just stomp your opponent because you get a really powerful turn with it in Savage Sash and Mandible Claws, which we are on for this aggressive plan. For the rest of the inventory, we are playing, for our aggro plan, we're going to be going up Savage Feast, mainly for the Beaten Trackers. If you bring in Beaten Trackers in any other matchup, bring in the Savage Feast, as that's mainly what it's there for. Then, as well as Pulping and Wild Ride as just some good going options. There are matchups where we where we will opt to bring in Savage Feast as well as Beaten Trackers, even though they're blocking matchups. These are going to be things like other Brutes, possibly, although KO, you might want just the full wealth of armor versus any like true mid-range matchup. So nothing that's going to try to kill you too fast or burst you, or anything that's way too obviously, if something that's way too defensive, you're bringing in the Beaten Trackers and the Savage Feast anyway. But I don't know, what's a good example? I guess the Mirror opt to play Beaten Trackers as just some aggro bursts that can deal some extra damage against a lot of the wizards. You might opt to go for a slower deck. I would still bring in the Beaten Trackers and the Savage Feast for the consistency option. Even though against Cecilio, like I said, I wouldn't bring in Wild Ride and Pulping because they don't really do much. We want the physical block since that deck's mostly physical. I'd want to play a more consistent game. So even though Beaten Trackers, Savage Feast are what I'd bring in, I wouldn't bring in those. That's a good one, Cecilio, for a reason why you'd want the Trackers and Feasts over some other stuff. For the slow plan, though, mostly what we're going to be bringing in every game is Old Leather and Vim, Escalate, Order, and Command and Conquer. If you don't own CNC, sorry, but this is really the only one you should be playing here. Right now, none of the other CNC replacements are that good. I guess you could say with a rise of OG KO, the weakest link might be pretty nice because there's a lot of no block cards like Pulping and Wild Ride, but CNC I think is just the way. Escalate Order is a really nice effect since this gives you a bunch of bonus toughness against decks that are going to throw one attack at you. This one's really good because you can just so easily use Tuffnut, play this, get 4 toughness. This turns on both your Disperse and your Disarm and gives you a really nice 1-card block. Old Leather and Vim is a really nice 2 for 7 that's really easy to turn on, but also gives us a toughness and a vigor token that will help us with our later turns. Overall, I think the Switchboard plan is pretty good. I do tend to like that a little more than the other plan, that the more fatiguey plan. However, since there are people that do like to play that full fatigue option, since I don't think the full aggro option is that powerful, I am going to put the cards I would swap out in the deck notes. If you wanted that full blocking list, then I'll put the rest of those cards in the maybe board for you, and we'll go over that one real quick. For the recommended swaps, if you wanted to just play a slower based list, we have some more blocking cards that are really nice. These are my 2 favorite blocks that I would play. If you didn't want to play Never Give Up, because this card isn't amazing, I think it's pretty fun in Tuffnut because if your deck's built in a way you can sort of guarantee that you get the 6, you can use it sort of like a D-React, block with a Smash Up, see what's on top, then use Tuffnut's ability to pitch that card, have the crowd cheer you, then you can use the Never Give Up, since you need to be cheered. But you also need to have less life, which you probably will have if you're fatiguing. So I do think the Never Give Up is pretty cool. But Will of the Crowd, I think, is a lot better if you had to just play one block. All you need to do is be cheered. This one can work nicely if you need to go super tall with something like Good Nature Brutality, or you can use your hero ability on your opponent's turn that you plan on blocking with a Dig Up to get a nice 5 block there. Or you need to block with something else. You have to block it with the Good Nature Brutality, or you can put it with a Dig Up, then use Tuffnut in response to the Dig Up to get the resource to pitch, have the crowd cheer you. That if you needed to play blocks. If you don't like blocks, you can easily not play blocks. Just play Sink Below and Shelter from the Storm instead. But I do like these ones, especially Will of the Crowd, because it does do a fair amount. Of course, though, you're not using your hero ability aggressively every turn, so you will be fairly behind, which does suck. For D-Reacts, other than those 2, which I'll add the more you can play, I'll add the Sink and the the shelter in here and add it to the notes on the notes section for you all. But I think Springboard Somersault is a D-React of note, since it's something you can sit on in your arsenal pretty easily, and it is also a yellow, so hitting it off Tuffnut will still let you swing your weapon. That could be pretty nice. So it's here mainly to note because of that. There is another yellow block 4 that is in the set. However, that card gives your opponent a Vigor token, so it's not always the best thing. The last 2 cards in the maybe board I think should be added in are old favorites. Over the head or disembody, whatever. I think it might be disembody. The red version of the disable. It's not called disable, right? Disarm. Of the disarm and disperse, the red version, I would rather play old favorite, because old favorite can be put on the bottom of your deck and just be a repeatable attack. Repeatable block, not attack, because of course when you play it, it will go away. But it could be used to block with it multiple times, which is pretty nice. And outed. If you'll notice, I haven't talked about Gravy at all. Gravy's still very, very good. That's actually sort of why, you know, none of these new heroes are good, because they all are very slow. They all throw 1 attack a turn, apart from the new KO, of course. They can't deal with permanent-based heroes, and Gravy Bones is still as popular. Still as popular as ever, and just runs you over. So, even though we have something we can do versus Gravy, we can play these go again attacks. We have claws with some discard outlets. Outed is something we need if we're playing the full fatigue version, so we don't immediately explode to Gravy. Of course, you could say, well, Gravy, it's a bad matchup anyway. You know, at least Outed gives us something. You can play E-Strikes as well. I think actually E-Strike is something I haven't really tested against Gravy. That one I think might actually be pretty good. My one problem with E-Strike, though, is you already don't have many cards in your hand. That one has to have you use a card from hand, which can be pretty tough. There's also some go again attacks that get go again if you have a 6 in your pitch, not Zealous Belting. There's a new one that's in Barut. I'll add all of these to the maybe board so you can have options for cards I would recommend, but these are just the 5 I wanted to talk about for the video. But with all of that, that is going to be the end of the video. I'm not sure how long this one actually was. Sorry if I rambled on a little bit, but Tuffnut is a pretty fun hero, as long as you don't play against like the absolute best heroes in the entire game. He is a fatigue deck, which, you know, people might not really find the most fun, but I think he's the best fatigue deck right now. That's just pure fatigue. He gets to keep a lot of cards because he gets a bunch of free block value from the toughness tokens, and him only drawing 3 cards a turn. So it's fine at best. Next week, we'll take a look at one of the other heroes. Not sure which one yet, but with all of that said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.